In this episode, Dominic Harborne, a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt coach, trainer, and chief examiner of APMG's Lean Six Sigma certifications, speak to us about the origins of Lean and how its initial use in the telecommunications sector, delivering a five-fold improvement in product quality, has expanded into other industries covering all business processes, and the benefits this brings. Dominic then talks about the seesaw effect between quality and speed, and how Lean Six Sigma is the framework to improve both at the same time. He shares his opinions on how the routine and consistent use of Lean Six Sigma can help tackle the pervasive culture of firefighting within organizations. Finally, Dominic's advice to any manager on the first step to incorporating Lean Six Sigma is simple. Just start measuring and find out what you need to improve. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We're here to help you and your organization understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Dominic Harborne. Dominic holds a degree in electrical and electronic engineering and a master's in materials management. While he was working for an automotive casting manufacturer, he was immersed in Lean Six Sigma, and he worked with a number of the world's largest motoring manufacturers. Based on that, he developed the idea of Lean Six Sigma as a management framework, and he was able to put it into practice when he worked for an American logistics supplier, where he completely redesigned their facility around flow principles to great success and huge profit for the organization. He then came back to the UK and for the last 15 years has spent his time coaching, training and consulting. And during that period, he's helped probably thousands of individuals and hundreds of organizations improve the way they work based on the principles of Lean Six Sigma. Interested in these days of transformation, he believes Lean Six Sigma is a transformational management approach, and we'll hear more about that later. It will come as no surprise he's a master black belt, and his passion is to engage more organizations in improving the way they work using Lean Six Sigma. Welcome, Dominic.
Thank you.
So, Dominic, my understanding is Six Sigma started about 30 years ago. It's always attributed to Motorola, but lots of companies have claimed success and ownership of Lean Six Sigma. And in those early days, there was lots of financial benefits ascribed to adopting Six Sigma. Is it still as popular and effective today? And as a supplementary to that, people talk about transforming their business today. Is Six Sigma really a transformational approach?
Okay, so is it still effective? Six Sigma is an inherently effective performance improvement tool. It's used successfully in many, many organizations. The question as to whether it's popular or not is maybe a little bit of a different question. It's popular where it's embedded and working, and it's not popular where it's misunderstood or misused. Overall, it's probably used more widely than it has been in the past, but perhaps not in the same way as it was when it was originally introduced by Motorola. It's probably worth taking a step back and just understanding what the motivation was for Motorola and why Motorola developed Six Sigma. At the start, Motorola had a very specific issue with exceptionally poor quality product shipping to their customers. And initially, they completely ignored it because they had huge commercial success. So they just didn't see this quality problem as a business problem. They didn't see it as a high priority. Once that problem was brought to the attention of the CEO, Bob Galvin, and he recognized the medium and long-term risks to the Motorola brand, then they identified that Six Sigma was the exact right approach to bring about a quality-focused cultural change within the organization. Bob Galvin committed to spending as much on improvement activities as they were previously spending on correcting broken products. So mend the processes so that they make good products rather than mend poor products. And over a 3-year period, using Six Sigma as the approach, they made a 20 times reduction in their defective products. This won them an Operational Excellence Award in the US called the Malcolm Baldrige Award. One of the guys who was sitting in the audience was Jack Welch, the CEO of GE. Obviously a huge multi-conglomerate organization in the States. And Jack Welch looked at 20 times reduction in defective product over 3 years. And I think he said, I'd like a bit of that. And he took Six Sigma, he took the ideas from Six Sigma, he probably popularized the name Six Sigma. Most of the black belts that later went out and seeded other industries come from GE, just because it's such a huge organization.
I mean, I've read that history, and I've read the history that Six Sigma was very popular within GE. But was that transformational, or was it just a quality-driven approach within two large conglomerates? Was it transformational back then 30 years ago? And why do you think it's transformational today?
So we'll come on to why it's transformational today. But was it transformational 30 years ago? Absolutely. They had these huge problems. They didn't have the approaches embedded to deal with those problems. And at Motorola and at GE, Six Sigma was simply the way they did business. There's a quote by Jack Welch that says, Six Sigma is the way we do business. So it's the way he managed from top to bottom every layer of the organization. And Jack Welch is also notably the person who first started applying Six Sigma outside of manufacturing. He took Six Sigma into GE Capital, which is GE's finance arm. And the reports are that they made greater benefits there quicker than they actually did in the manufacturing part of his business. So I guess interestingly then it would be the question, are GE still using Six Sigma? And the answer is, well, they are, but not quite the way that they did before.
And of course, GE are not the same company they are today as they were before either.
Indeed. And we might make some get some understanding of whether or not they should be using Six Sigma in a different way. Six Sigma lasted for about 10 years after Jack Welch left GE. It was about 10 years ago that really GE stopped using Six Sigma in this all-encompassing form. So now it's used more situationally, where they have they recognize that they have a facility where quality problems are a big issue, and then they will go in and they will embed Six Sigma.
Leading on from Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma then arrived. I don't know how long Lean was tacked on to Six Sigma, but was that because the world was moving towards a different view, lean manufacturing, focus on flow, focus on waste issues, or was it because people felt that Six Sigma wasn't delivering what they expected it to do when Lean came along? You know, how do you explain the need to bolt Lean onto Six Sigma if Six Sigma was so successful in delivering those quality improvements? and successful outside of manufacturing. And again, has the combination really been effective, or is it put lean on the front of something? Like if you put agile on the front of something, people think it's going to be better than the previous incarnation.
Okay. I have a very biased opinion. I personally believe that Lean and Six Sigma form an exceptionally powerful combination. I think we should now be talking always about Lean and Six Sigma together. We probably need to just explain where Lean came from. It was based on the Toyota production system that was developed by Taiichi Ono, chief engineer of the automotive production plant. And he developed it over years, over decades. And it started to revolutionize the rest of the automotive sector from about the late 80s. That's Lean on its own, rooted, as you say, in flow, but interestingly, including some of the concepts and approaches of reducing waste, reducing unevenness or variation, and reducing overburden as well. So there's some concepts there that we can definitely add into Six Sigma and complement Six Sigma. And it was about 10 years later, there was an American called Michael George of the George Group. He was the owner of a successful lean consultancy. He'd spent 10 years promoting lean to American manufacturers. And he started looking at Six Sigma and realizing that there was a good integration if you did both at the same time. So his book that he brought out in 2002, called Lean Six Sigma, had the subtitle which pretty much says it all: combining Six Sigma quality with lean speed. So now we can see that we can make dual benefits by bringing these two things together. And for me, this was an essential development. I sometimes joke that he stole the idea from me because I had learned Lean and Six Sigma from the automotives separately, and I'd come to similar conclusions. I was just using them both because they work together as complementary approaches. I'll just give you almost the thought experiment that proved it in my own mind. And this was born of observation of the automotive manufacturing company that I was working in at the time, and I won't mention which one it was. As leaders of organizations, we used to ask our people to work faster when the output was low. And the result of that was more errors and defects, lower quality. So the next thing that we did was say, okay, we now need to concentrate on quality. So can you work, please, more diligently and more carefully? And of course, what then happens is everybody slows down. So you see this seesaw effect between quality and speed. And what we need to achieve, what we need is a framework that will improve both speed and quality at the same time, where when we improve one, we don't get an adverse effect on the other. And that is what Lean and Six Sigma gives to us. If we put it in the simplest terms, if we standardize our processes, if we simplify them, if we remove waste, and if we reduce variation, then we will achieve improvements in both speed and quality at the same time. It's inevitable in my mind.
Dominic, fascinating. I think earlier on you said that within GE, they have moved away from GE as being, if you like, a corporate approach and using it for specific instances where they feel they have a problem, and Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma can help. So is it really worthwhile in an organization applying Lean Six Sigma at a project basis, or do you really need to introduce it as a continuous improvement process in order to see real benefits?
Well, I am biased. We absolutely have to introduce it as a whole approach for an organization. Any organization that is encouraging their employees to do one-off projects in Lean Six Sigma will be getting a minimal return on their investment of the training that it cost to get this person up to speed. So long as the work that they then do, the improvement projects that they then do, are concentrating on something that is a significant pain to a valued customer of the organization, then that individual improvement project will be worthwhile. But the results and the benefits are going to be short-lived. Why is that so? It's so because in a very short period of time, those people who have undertaken an improvement project will find other priorities are put on them, usually by the leaders of the organization. And these quickly overtake. And people persuade themselves they simply don't have time to invest in improvement activities because there are other people that are shouting more loudly, and they just get sucked back into that old reactive habit of firefighting. And I talk to lots and lots of people each and every week, and what I see is, sadly, there persists within many organizations this pervasive culture of firefighting. And Lean Six Sigma is one of the ways that we could embed a system to reduce the firefighting. It's actually very, very difficult. At the end of a very difficult week of firefighting, and having been successful firefighting within an aerospace company, I had to talk to my ops director and say, look, this is fine, this is great, we've saved the day, but we've now got to go back and work out how to prevent those fires erupting in the future. I don't want to go through this week ever again. And that was the moment for my ops director that it clicked.
I mean, that's a fascinating story. I used to work in construction. I used to have a view that an awful lot of construction site managers in particular managed by Post-it notes. And they needed to have lots of Post-it notes on their desk or on their wall about do this, do that, finish this, finish that. And instead of actually having a calm approach to the plan and trusting people to do things, it seemed to be that if you didn't have a bundle of Post-it notes that you had to work through because everything was urgent, you weren't doing your job. Yeah, it is a fascinating insight, I think, into how people see their role as a manager.
Yeah, I think that the style of management, the training in management nowadays is reduced, and if we were to train our managers to operate and openly, I would say, using a Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement approach to management, then what we get is organized common sense. And And a lot of people, when they've been on any of my training courses, say, well, do you know what? Everything you're talking about is fairly straightforward. It's just common sense, isn't it? And I say, well, yes, it is. But you know the one thing about common sense, it's not that common.
Sticking with that theme, though, I mean, all the reports you read is, the UK suffers poor productivity in comparison with other developed countries. Now, I understand there's some argument about that, about the way productivity is measured. But if we accept that as an honest statement, why do you think that we haven't used Lean Six Sigma throughout different parts of industry, throughout different parts of business, to help address this issue, if it is relatively straightforward to apply, and if it is common sense? Why are we leaving these £1 billion worth of productivity improvements on the side rather than adopting a process that must be, 30, 40 years old by now?
Yeah, I mean, some of the body of knowledge goes back 100 years successfully. We're still using some of the tools developed in the 1920s in exactly the same way as we are today. Why? Well, just because they work, and why would you, if it works, why would you try to fix it or change it? But to your question, why does the UK suffer poor productivity, and why doesn't it undertake an approach to Lean Six Sigma? This really is the question that interests me. Why do senior execs not listen to their people and integrate their improvement ideas into the everyday process? Why do organizations see the only solution as a great big large step change to their IT system, ripping out the old system and introducing some sort of shiny new one, which always seems to be expensive and time consuming? When we make massive system changes, we rarely achieve the intended results on a sustained basis. And that's because we haven't addressed the underlying problems and we haven't dealt with them. So sadly, within a very short period of time, the new process is as error-ridden as the old one and as clunky as the old one, because we haven't developed the ongoing continuous improvement approach to deal with the underlying issues. Ironically, it's actually part of the reason for not using continuous improvement is the way in which Lean Six Sigma is standardized and taught. Because most of the training materials and standards are based on the GE manufacturing standards and the Motorola manufacturing standards. And most of the best examples that you can identify come out of manufacturing. And of course, it's then actually difficult for most people, anyone that has not worked in manufacturing, to make that translation from manufacturing example into the administrative workplace or into the customer journey. It's very, very difficult, understandably so as well. In terms of the way we teach Six Sigma, the standards place a high importance on the more advanced statistics. These are deemed essential by the keepers of the standards. The application of design of experiments or response surface analysis, for sake of argument, just seems completely out of place when an organization still believes itself to be producing or serving one-offs. It's simply not relevant. They do not see the relevance of Lean Six Sigma. So, in my own view, a greater emphasis on the basics would go a very long way. I try to give all of my clients the understanding that variation kills the performance of any process. And we don't need advanced statistics to recognize chaos and variation in the process. Most of us can observe the process, and we can see those parts of the process, those suppliers, those customers, those teams within our workplace that are operating and contributing most of the chaos and variation. We can usually do it by observation. If we want to get a little bit more scientific, we can introduce some charts. But for the most part, we don't have to go much further than charting in order to use statistics to show where the variation is.
I mean, you make a very powerful argument there, but is it? I mean, I can understand that in a manufacturing environment, it's a pretty well-defined and, dare I say it, controlled environment. But in a lot of other activities, people can be dependent upon incoming information or incoming requests over which they have no control. So you can't prevent that interruption to the flow of your day, even though when that request has arrived, you might be able to handle it efficiently and effectively. So is it any real surprise that when you're actually looking at sort of knowledge-based workers, it becomes more difficult to apply these flow techniques and these measurements just by the nature of how their incoming work comes from them? You know, we both know about Kanban boards. We know about there's a backlog, and you can bring the backlog forward, and you can do that on whatever work you're doing. But is it fair to say that you can lift a statistical lean approach from a controlled environment like manufacturing and put it into an organization of knowledge-based workers, maybe an organization of creative people, and expect to see the same improvements?
So you absolutely can. In my view, it's a matter of perspective or level that you observe and attempt to control around. Clearly, in manufacturing, we're attempting to control using statistics at a very fine level. We need to just bring it up to a higher level to see how we apply it outside of manufacturing. If I give you one example that I came across and worked on, this was a sales process that sells still highly specialized bespoke investment products to high net worth individuals. These were highly paid, highly incentivized sales individuals who saw it as their goal to give each of their clients a bespoke answer. That process, when we looked at it, actually comprised of standard high-level steps pursued in sequential order. If viewed at a high level, what did they do? They found leads. They developed leads, they qualified them, they identified opportunities, they designed a solution, and then they sold the solution. And that's what they did over and over again. So it's more a case of seeing what is happening in a framework and seeing how we might then flow the work between each of the high-level process steps. If we look closely inside each task, it is likely that we're going to see some commonality. And if we can identify commonality, then potentially we can standardize that and maybe even delegate that part of the task to maybe a less skilled individual who, by the way, probably is paid less. And the end customer still sees a perfectly bespoke product if the salesperson is doing their job right. However, you have removed some of the variation, you've acknowledged some of the commonality, and you've lowered the cost base at the same time. At the same time as doing that, you've probably increased the quality of the end product, because you're starting to use off-the-shelf modules rather than having a completely new and bespoke delivery or service every time. Where did the motivation come from for me to be working with this group of people on this process? Well, it came from the operational side of the business that found it absolutely impossible to provide a bespoke solution for everybody. So it was absolutely essential to join the two together and make it more effective and more efficient, and at the same time allowing the customer to believe that they were having a completely bespoke solution.
And of course, today, that could be done by artificial intelligence. That outsourcing to a lower paid member of staff, you could actually have it in a system where you just pull the component parts of your bespoke proposal together, bespoke the section that needs to be, and then send it off to the customer. And does that come back to your early comment about understanding the process and getting the process right before you buy in your new big shiny IT system?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the challenges that I get a huge amount is that where you have these bespoke organizations or bespoke products or services, then there's this inherent belief that everything is a one-off. And that becomes a fait accompli. It becomes an effective confirmation bias. If we view everything as bespoke and we stop looking for the commonalities, then everything remains bespoke by nature. If, on the other hand, we challenge ourselves to find the commonality, it's always there, and we can make improvements in efficiency. One of the things that just came to me literally last week is that the theory of runners, repeaters, and rarities can usually be used, and it can actually be extended. So within the vast majority of even the most bespoke processes, about 80% of the tasks are very similar. About 16% are very similar with a few add-ons, and only 4% are truly bespoke. And if we have a continuous improvement system which constantly looks to redesign our processes around those sort of numbers, then we can get 80% of what we do done by probably the least qualified, lower skilled, lower paid individuals. And I was discussing this literally last week, and one of my clients suggested, and you can go further than that. You can then move the parts that are very similar and maybe get those done by a robot, or get them done by the customer. And we now see that there's a natural progression, but all of that needs continuous monitoring and continuous work. It's not going to happen on its own. So if we integrate that into a continuous improvement approach, then we're working with technology as well. So we've taken that extra step.
Dominic, that's fascinating. One final question before we wrap up. Listening to you, I think you could argue with any board of directors there's a clear return on investment for a company to adopt a lean Six Sigma mindset and approach within the business. But when you finish that pitch and the CEO looks at you and says, okay, Dominic, I'm sold on it, where do I start? How do you answer that question to an organization that really wants to get the benefits of a Lean Six Sigma approach? What do they do first? So the first thing, the foundation, is to start measuring.
you can always show a return on investment for adopting Lean Six Sigma, but it's not always necessarily clear up front. If we haven't monitored customer satisfaction, quality, speed of delivery, employee motivation on a regular basis, then it makes it far more difficult to justify why we're going to invest in Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement. So the first thing is to start measuring. Start measuring what's important to the customer. If we count everything that's going wrong, if we count everything that is late, if we count every imperfect customer interaction, and we put a cost to it, and then we use a tool like Pareto to prioritize what we should be doing first to get the biggest bang for the buck. And then we simply need to start problem solving. And given that it's continuous improvement, never stop. One of the easiest ways to prove return on investment is to simply reduce the investment side of the equation to almost nothing by embedding continuous improvement into the management framework of the organization. Because then there's arguably no on cost. There's no difference between the on cost of that as a management framework as to any other management training or approach. So having measured in order to identify your current cost of poor quality, that ought to produce the burning platform that encourages an organization to adopt Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement on an ongoing basis.
Dominic, that's fascinating. Thank you very much for that. I think the message is loud and clear. Start to measure what you're actually doing. Start to look at where you can make the biggest improvements and then get started. Dominic, very many thanks for your time. Great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.